Segunda parte aí para
First of all,
vocês.
the way she's handled the issue of freedom of women's bodies to have control over their bodies. Secondly, her ability to handle almost
Continua
any
aí
issue on board. This was a hell of a
Segunda
prosecutor.
parte é para
She was a
vocês. O
first rate
ensinamento aí
person, and in a
do
sense, she was
presidente
very
dos Estados
good. I
Unidos,
wouldn't
da
have
grande
picked her unless I
potência,
thought she
Joe
was
Biden,
qualified to
né?
be president.
Se desiste ou não
From
da
the very
candidatura,
beginning,
já que
I made no bones about
o
that.
Partido Democrata,
She is
né,
qualified to be
pediu que
president.
desistisse da
That's why I picked her.
candidatura perante a idade, né, o esquecimento, mas está bem lúcido e bem consciente da resposta, né?
Thank you, Mr.
Escutem.
President. Presidency is the
Pouco
most
de
straining
pigarro,
job
né?
in the
Normal,
world,
né?
and it's 24/7. How can you say you'll be up for that next year, in 2 years, in 4 years, given the limits you've acknowledged that you have today?
The limits I've acknowledged I have?
There's been reporting that you've acknowledged that you need to go to bed earlier and your evening around 8.
That's not true. Look, what I said was,
Pouco de riso,
instead of
né?
my every
Mas
day
consciente das
starting at
palavras.
7 and going to bed at midnight, it'd be smarter for me to pace myself a little more. And I said, for example, the 8, 7, 6 stuff, instead of starting the fundraiser at 9 o'clock, start at 8 o'clock. People get to go home by 10 o'clock. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, and if you look at my schedule since I made that stupid mistake in the campaign, in the debate, I mean, my schedule has been full bore. I've done, where's Trump been? Riding around in his golf cart, filling out his scorecard before he hits the ball? I mean, look, he's done virtually nothing. And I have, I don't know how many, don't hold me to it, roughly 20 major events. Some with thousands of people showing up. And so I just think it's better. I always have an
Compartilhe esse vídeo aí para
whether I was
vocês,
playing
para algumas
sports
pessoas
or doing politics, just to
queiram
keep
assistir,
going.
né?
I just gotta just pace myself a little more.
Pode compartilhar.
Pace myself.
Inscreva-se no canal, né? Segunda parte aí,
15 time zones.
pronunciamento do então presidente Joe Biden, se existe ou não da Casa Branca, da candidatura à presidência dos Estados Unidos, né?
I love my staff.
Diante de tanta pressão do Partido Democrata,
Very
né, para
I'm catching
desistir,
hell
né,
from my wife.
porque vê que o Donald Trump irá ganhar de goleada essa eleição, né? Mas a princípio ele não
I'm
vai
sorry,
desistir.
Zeke Miller, Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions for you. First, on the NATO summit, President Zelensky, in your meeting with him, he pressed you to lift your limitations on the Ukrainian use of American weapons, saying that, in his public remarks afterwards, saying that Ukraine cannot win the war unless those limitations are lifted. Are you reconsidering your position on that? And then secondly, following up on Felicia's question there, leaders of your own party have said that they're not worried about that debate. They're worried about the next bad night and the bad night after that. How can you reassure the American people that you are up to the task and that there won't be more bad nights at a debate stage or somewhere else?
First thing about Zelensky asking for the ability to strike deep into Russia. We have allowed Zelensky to use American weapons in the near term, in the near abroad, into Russia. Whether or not he should be attacked. For example, should Zelensky, he's not. If he had the capacity to strike Moscow, strike the Kremlin, would that make sense? It wouldn't. The question is, what's the best use of the weaponry he has, the weaponry we're getting to him? I've gotten a more long-range capacity, as well as defensive capacity. And so our military is working. I'm following the advice of my commander-in-chief, the chief of staff of the military, as well as the Secretary of Defense and our intelligence people. And we're making a day-to-day basis on what they how far they should go in. That's a logical thing to do. Second question related to
Bad nights, sir. How do you reassure the American people that you won't have more bad nights, whether they be on a debate stage or it's a matter of foreign policy?
Well, I'll tell you what, the best way to assure them is the way I assure myself. And that is, am I getting the job done? Am I getting the job done? Can you name me somebody who's gotten more major piece of legislation passed in 3.5 years? Created 2,000 jobs this last week. So if I slow down, I can't get the job done. That's a sign that I shouldn't be doing it. But there's no indication of that yet. None. What we got here? Merrick, Pulaski Radio.
Thank you, Mr. President. How are you?
I'm well.
The elections in the US have consequences around the world. You have pretty high standing in
Muitos
Europe. I
jornalistas,
just
conhecidos da Casa
asked Trump
Branca,
about
conhecido
you,
do
and he said
próprio
we are happy to have
Joe
him as the
Biden,
President of the United
muitos
States.
com certeza
But
selecionados para
There's
estarem
a
ali
concern.
com perguntas
Many people in Poland and
que
across
venham a
Europe
favorecer, né,
are
até
worried
mesmo o
that
Joe
the former
Biden, né,
president
mas com
may win the
perguntas
election.
conscientes, perguntas até meias
And there's a lot
pesadas,
of
né,
concern that
mas com falas bem
Donald
positivas
Trump
do então
may
presidente Joe
weaken
Biden.
NATO,
Escuta aí, compartilhe esse
stop
vídeo aí,
supporting
é
Ukraine,
interessante aí
or
para quem
push
estiver
Ukraine to give up
assistindo, né, no meu
territories
canal.
to Russia.
Inscreva-se no meu canal também.
And yourself was warning just 2 minutes ago about it. So my question is, do you think that Europe will be left on its own if Donald Trump wins the election? And what's your advice to European leaders to prepare for possible US disengagement?
Well, look, I think, how can I say this without sounding too self-serving? I've not had any of my European allies come up to me and say, Joe, don't run. What I hear them say is, you've got to win. You can't let this guy come forward. He'd be a disaster. He'd be a disaster. I mean, I think he said in one of his rallies, don't hold me to this, recently, where NATO, I just learned about NATO, or something to that effect. Foreign policy has never been his strong point. And he seems to have an affinity to people who are authoritarian. That worries, as I tell you, Poland, that worries Europe. That worries Poland. And nobody, including the people of Poland, think that if he wins in Ukraine, he's going to stop in Ukraine. That that's going to be the end of it. And so what I can say is, I think I'm the best qualified person to do the job, to make sure that Ukraine does not fall, that Ukraine succeeds, that the European alliance stays strong. You may recall, no one was talking about Finland joining NATO. I remember talking to Putin right after we got elected in Geneva, and he was talking about what we should do. We couldn't be in Eastern Europe, etc. And I said, you're looking for the Finlandization of Ukraine, but you're going to get the NATOization of Finland. And about 4 weeks later, I got a call. No, that's not true. Probably 5 months later, from the president of Finland, could he come and see me? In my office, I invited him to the Oval Office. We sat down and talked. He said he wanted to join NATO. Could I help?
Na íntegra aí para vocês do meu
It wasn't
canal.
automatic. And then I got a call from the Swedes.
Lançamento do então presidente Joe Biden.
I beg your pardon?
Desista ou não da candidatura, né? A presidente dos Estados Unidos.
And so Finland joined NATO. 800-mile border is a significant, and they were already allies, but they weren't part of NATO. And you heard, I think you heard, maybe I can't recall what he said in public in our closed meeting, but he wouldn't mind being repeated. He said, we decided in Finland, the people of Finland decided they had to be part of NATO. It was in our interest because of the joint ability to be together, to dissuade any attack on Finland. And the same thing with Sweden. It took a lot of selling to some folks, particularly in Turkey and other places, to agree to the expansion. But it expanded. And we're a hell of a lot stronger because of it. We're more secure because of it. And by the way, I was able to get 50 other nations, 50 to support Ukraine. 50. We were able to bring about a coalition of Europe and Asia, Japan and South Korea. I just we talked about AUKUS, and we talked about the relationship between Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, the United States. We're making the world safer and stronger because we have to deal with the new arrangement that exists in the world. The Cold War is over. The post-war era is over. What is going to replace it? And I respectfully suggest I have a pretty good idea what that should be. I've convinced a lot of people to follow it. We're just going to get stronger. David Sanger. What is that?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Be nice, David.